40 chess. Yeah. 40 chess. 40 chess. Let's get it.
Yo, is that T-Dog?
40 chess. 40 chess. Hey. 40 chess. This a trade show. Patreon where the trades go. Tap in and watch. That's what you came for. Ain't gotta say my name. They know my name, bro.
What's good, man?
We got McNutted in ATM. Always start off the show with a trade from them. You should always make sure that your trade is in. Patreon, why not be a Patreon? Know you wish you could spend every day with them. Tap in and say what you gon' say with them. South Harmon can fill up a stadium. Next time you log in, make sure that you bring a friend. We about to kick off, let the day begin. Go follow the socials. 40 Chess FF is posted. If your trade is an F, you get roasted. Go like and subscribe for the crew. Apple, Spotify, and the YouTube. You know Cooper got the warp too. Let us give you a walkthrough. 40 Chess. This is 40 Chess.
Like Eminem said, it feels so good to be back. Feels good, man.
Hey, man, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, it feels great to be back.
It does. Feels great, man. Welcome back into the 40 Chess Dynasty Football Podcast. We took last week off, Adam. Well,
I was just gonna touch on that.
Mostly, you took last week off. For the most part, I did the marathon show with Eric, which, you know, if I had my way too, like I felt like Eric was rushing me to get out of there at the end. I don't know if how many people listened to it, like especially at the end, and I'm like, nah, I'm good, man. I ain't doing no content this week. Let's go. You want to go back over these teams when we get to the end, Eric? You want to just go in reverse?
So let's go. Let's rewind this thing. Redo it again.
Run it back,
man. Mike, I never like taking time off of doing work here because I don't feel like it's that much of work, right? But I also was like getting. I don't know, man. It was so much. You do so much so often. You're in this schedule routine, and man, that week off actually was it was amazing because now I'm just like ready. I was itching to do a show again, you know, all week.
Completely understand. Like I really did enjoy myself too. Like just kind of having a week to step back and relax and. It's never worked for me too, but like the season was just such a fucking grind this year, man. Like it was, you know, I have so many leagues to take care of and commission so many leagues, and then we're doing content. It's like every day I'm doing stuff. I rush home from work and you just get right at it. And it was like, man, it was kind of weird feeling, you know, like I come home on an afternoon and it's like, I ain't got shit to do right now. This is how the other half lives.
I know, man.
Like I kind of miss this a little bit.
It was freeing a little freeing. Yeah, to just have that week, but.
And then I felt dirty. And then, like, this week I was like, fuck, I can't wait till we do some content, man. I got to get back and talk to my guy.
Well, because let me just tell you how sick I kind of am, right? Like, I told Mike, and I told you initially, honestly, because for me, it's hard to take a week off. A lot of last week was, like, reflecting on my leagues and looking back and, like, trying to make myself take some time off because in the year, not only do I not take time off, I'll end up doing just, I put so much into everything we're doing, content, you know, talking about stuff, trying to improve or whatever process we're working on. I said I'm going to take a week off, and then I couldn't even do it all. I had to do my own solo podcast before I finished the week. I'm a degenerate, man, you know?
Which was fantastic, by the way. So for people who don't know, we do have a podcast feed, right? And it's a good one. And there's some podcast exclusives. Hopefully here, especially with the off season, things are settled down. I'll be able to get some the Spotlight series cranked back up and get some more dynamite guests on like I've had. Adam's got a solo show on there. You know, obviously America's Game, 40 Chess, that kind of stuff makes it on there. The AMA, when I remember, makes it on there in the trade show audio. But if you only catch us on YouTube, like there's a podcast version out there, and there's some exclusive content there. That's really, really good stuff over there. Like I love doing the Spotlight series.
Yes.
Just getting to interview people. And you and I kind of talked about doing a solo episode, at least in my opinion, like it stinks. I'd rather talk to you. To be completely honest.
Oh,
but
of course.
It's also kind of therapeutic and a little, like, because there's so much shit that goes on in my brain, and if I just let it all out like verbal vomit all the time, you would get mad at me. Be like, fuck, you never let me talk. And never get to say anything. So
what do you mean? What do you mean if I felt like that?
If. Oh, my bad.
we both. I'm saying we both do that to each other. It's that's even when we're doing it together. I'm 100% with you though. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just fucking around.
Nah, you're good, man. So, anyways, we're back for the 4D Chess Dynasty Football Podcast, and this is my favorite episode we do every year. We've made it a habit.
Same.
I don't know if we want to call it the accountability episode, whatever, but our biggest misses, where we fucked up, and it was prevalent. I had a great, successful overall fantasy season, but there's a lot of things where I look back and I'm like, damn, man, like how much better could I have been if I would have got that right?
Well,
if I wouldn't have fucked this up so bad. So
yeah,
I love doing the accountability episode, and that's where I learn all my shit, man. I don't. If I go out and I win a league, Adam, I don't really learn a whole lot from winning that league, right? Like, okay, well, whatever the fuck I did here was working, right? Okay, we just try that again next year. It's the ones where I get kicked in the teeth. I'm like, oh, that was heartbreaking. Oh, what could I have done to change it? So, accountability episode.
I think, Mike, it's funny because as you say that, the podcast I did, solo podcast, the first episode anyway, so it's called Highly Detailed. The first episode, Transparent Failure, was a lot of that, right? Figuring out, because I had a bad year as far as overall teams that advanced, and I'm like, all right, I gotta really look back at this. Like, I know variance is strong, and I had some teams, Mike, that I still look back, I'm like, how in the world did I score more points than anyone in the league in the regular season and in the playoffs, but lost before the championship? Like that, sometimes variance happens. But when you have only a handful of wins in the playoffs, like there's got to be something else here to this, right? And so I started looking in, certain misses from not just players, but just your team as a whole. So that podcast, a lot of it was talking about exactly what you just said and why this episode for us on 4D is so great, because you can learn stuff from your successes if you're actually willing to peel back the curtains. But a lot of times that's when people end up resting on their laurels, right? They're like, oh man, I just won. I'm good. Like, look at this squad. Got a goon squad. Good luck. You guys chase me. Well, the best way to learn is actually through mistakes, or like, not even necessarily just mistakes, things that you can look back and reflect and be like, man, why did I do this though? It's not just seeing what happened. It's why did I do this, or where in the process that I had of missing, like where is there a learning ability here? Like what can I take from this now and go into next year? Okay, I did this last year. I did this 2 years ago. I need to work on not doing that again in 2024.
All right, so I'm going to kick it off. My biggest one for me, Adam.
Hit it up.
And this is going to encompass a few things, but we're just going to start with a position, the quarterbacks. Super flex leagues. That's all I play in. I don't play in 1 QB leagues. If you do good on you, I'll try to give the best advice possible for 1 QB leagues, but just know that's not what I do. Right? I'm a super flex guy through and through, or 2 QB. That's fine too. Quarterbacks, though, I put so much emphasis. Didn't matter if it was lineup, best ball, auction strategy, right? Like how many of these auction startups that we did were quarterbacks just went for ballistic prices. And me, when I'm in an auction, like I'm price checking every son of a bitch on fucking quarterbacks,
of course,
left and right. Like,
yep.
Nah, you ain't getting them for 150, boss. You want them, you got to come through me. So when I left a lot of those auctions, I may have 3-4 top 12 quarterbacks, I thought. And the quarterback position as a whole was dog shit this year, top to bottom. Josh Allen did fine by ESPN standard, scoring 23.1 fantasy points per game, Adam. That's QB1 for you, though, right? 23, and you're like, okay, that ain't so bad. Just by reference, 22 was a bad year for quarterbacks in general, and we kind of talked about that when we started looking at warp graphs, didn't we, leading into the season? Like,
of course, yeah.
I think this is an aberration, right? Like if you go look at 21, you go look at 20, 19, 18, like the quarterback line is so much higher than everybody else in Superflex leagues. 22 was kind of an odd year. All right, 23 though, we're getting back. Like we're coming back. It was even worse. In 22, your QB1 was 25.2 fantasy points per game, Adam. Almost 2 full fantasy points better. Jalen Hurts was than what Josh Allen scored this year. Josh Allen himself in 22, 24.7 fantasy points per game. Patrick Mahomes, 24.6. Joe Burrow, Davis, Webb, for 1 game. We don't really count him. But Justin Fields was pretty close to 20 points per game as well. Then you look at the 23 season, and it's, Josh Allen, like I said, leading the pack at 23. Hurts down to 21. Lamar 20.7. That's your probable MVP of the league right there at 20.7 fantasy points per game. Joe Flacco, old Joe Flacco, 20.2 fantasy points per game. Dak at 20.2. And then it's like a fall off. It's 18.8, 18.7, 18.5. Like the warp line in almost every league universal is just the quarterback line is below wide receivers. It's probably below running backs. If your tight end premium is nuts, it might even be like right in par with the tight end premium league. And it's quarterback by whole was a largely replaceable position. Like you probably hit on some guys, right? Some guys on your championship roster. You might have had some Joe Flaccos. And that was the dudes who were carrying you. Matt Stafford was on a heater. Jordan Love kind of came out of nowhere, and he was a above average warp option for you.
Really,
and may have been
very
beating
much
out
in
some
the
other
second
people.
half. Yeah,
right. But all those leagues, man, where I paid a premium, whether it was an auction, draft capital to move up in the startup, if it was an existing league, we did multiple dynasty trade shows where myself is trading 3-4 first-round picks plus, to go get Mahomes types, Justin Herberts, the Trevor Lawrences of the world. You largely struck out, and you struck out in a big way where, the Brock Purdy types, the ones that I shit on going into the season, all of a sudden, they're keeping pace or outscoring guys that you paid a premium for. So that was a huge miss for me. And while we're on the quarterback position, missed on Brock Purdy. Bad. Now, I still argue in my position for probably 7, 8, 9 weeks at this point. I've tried to be crystal clear about it, as I think he's a very good QB2 with some QB upside, QB1 upside, because of that offense. I don't think talent-wise he's like the most talented, and I think he maybe throws some passes where I'm like, yep, that's getting picked, right? And we've seen those multiple interception games, but he was definitely more on par where if you had Brock Purdy, you were doing all right, and Adam in the offseason, man, I was trading this dude away for third-round picks left and right, and I was buying into Trey Lance, who did nothing for you. So another part of the QB misses. But for me, quarterback position as a whole, top to bottom, didn't really matter kind of where you looked. I guess if you had Josh Allen, you were fine. You had Jalen Hurts, you got by. Lamar Jackson, we were partially right on. But even if you look at like his points per game, it was like, man, that's not what it could have been, right? If you're going to be one of the top warp options at the quarterback position, I expect you to be in a top warp option amongst the whole league, right? Like whatever league I look at, and that wasn't really the case for the quarterbacks this year.
Yeah, I got a crazy one for you here. All right, to kind of touch on this. Now, I see a question here. It's a good question. Casey Frank asked, did this year change perspective on the QB horde strategy? So many folks got away with Flacco, Mullins, Stick, etc. Like for me, the answer is no. Actually, still, I don't know where your take is on the quarterback horde. Are you changing your philosophy on the quarterback horde as general, or are you saying in auctions you kind of messed up by putting too much money up front of your whole budget in that scenario?
I'm not going to be as aggressive with my quarterback acquisitions. So whether that's in a normal snake draft startup, in a league, I'm not going to go pay the 4 first iron price for the Patrick Mahomes of the world anymore.
Okay.
But here's one thing. I think the quarterback horde strategy as a whole is still very beneficial.
Absolutely.
You still need it.
Absolutely.
Just because even though I say quarterback scoring was down and they were more on like the replacement level, having an option that's going to get you 17, 18 fantasy points, given your league scoring, versus, starting a skill position guy in that super flex spot is a massive, massive difference, right? Like warp-wise, that's still, you're better off with the quarterback. So it doesn't change the scarcity at all. I think it just changes the top value, where I don't want to pay that iron price in auction startups, in existing leagues anymore.
Yeah, I would say I think the big takeaway for me is doing it in a startup potentially still could happen depending on where the values are. Auction probably at the prices we were seeing all off season last year, absolutely not worth the bang for your buck, right?
Right.
You're going to be lucky to get out for what you ended up acquiring some of them for once you get into your budget. Now, I'll highlight, I think for me, Mike, I'm going to give you a couple of stats to just everyone to think about for a second. Why, when I look at this year, I believe still, Mike, this is going to be a little more of an aberration year for the quarterback position. I just want you guys to think about this, all right? Do you know who the passing touchdown leader was this year in the NFL?
Passing touchdown leader. Ooh. Dak Prescott?
Good. Yep, that's correct.
It's a good
So,
guess. All right.
Yeah, very good guess. Dak. Now, think about that for a second. A guy that had awful stats for 6 weeks led the entire league in touchdowns, and it wasn't all that close. He had 36 relative to the second. Mike, you have an idea who the second leading touchdown passer this year was at 32 touchdowns?
Josh Allen?
No. Josh Allen comes in at the number 6 spot, by the way.
Damn.
The top 5 are going to be just kind of or top 4 in particular are going to be kind of an eye-opener, I think, for people.
It wasn't Brock Purdy, was it?
Just narrowly missed. Brock Purdy, 31, the third spot.
Matt Stafford.
Matt Stafford was 11, 24.
Damn.
Yeah.
Dude, I have no idea.
Jordan Love at 32.
Jordan Love was 2?
Now, Mike, just think about that. Think about that reaction, and think about what I said about Dak Prescott. The top 2 passing touchdown leaders had terrible first half starts.
They did. Well, I wouldn't say Jordan Love had terrible first half start. Like, he did some things. I think it just took longer for us to get on board, right? Like, I was desperately trying there to, like, I don't know how many times we went over the warp, and I'm like, listen, I know, like, Jordan Love's had some moments where it hasn't looked good, but damn, warp's telling me he's decent at him. Any interest?
Mike, hold on.
Nah.
Just I need you to understand that while the warp was okay, the stats the stats on Jordan Love early were bad, dude. Understand? Listen, 55% completion, 245 passing, 56% completion, 151, 50%, 259, 63%, 246, 53%, 182. Like, his first half of the year was not a very good year as a quarterback at all.
Right.
Now, the reason I'm saying that, they both started off not the greatest, and they led the league in passing touchdowns at the end of the year. Because as a whole, not that it wasn't like, it was pretty bad if you look at it. And the names also, number 3, Brock Purdy. Number 4, Jared Goff.
Damn, Goff was that high.
That's what I'm saying. I think when you look at this, it's going to be more of an aberration. Number 7, Baker Mayfield. Number 9, Russell Wilson, who literally got benched and people said wasn't good all season.
Right. They're like, we're probably cutting him in the offseason now. Jared Stidham at your show for the last 2 weeks.
I actually think, Mike, now this is, call me crazy. I agree with you in the auction part. And I agree that we missed. If you built your team around 2 top 5 options, unless those were Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, you missed, right? That being said, I think this offseason, if this is the perception, not in an auction, waste all your money so you can't go get other players, but in startups specifically, in trades, if I can, it might be a chance to actually acquire quarterbacks at a down price because of a year that I think when we look back is going to be very odd relative to the rest of the time.
So you're saying you might even go a little bit more QB horde heavy?
Not in an auction, because I think what I found with you, especially this year, like I've done it before and gotten burnt, but I watched you a couple times. It's like, if you do it in an auction and you end up losing 70, 80% of your budget on that, you can't get a team formed, and now you're literally relying on selling these players at full boat or to even get back what you put into them.
Right. I think, too, with that general overall theme, at least how I'm looking at it right now, I think there's this is projection too, right? Let me preface this by, we just got burned hard in a lot of leagues. But when I go and I look at a league, like I take a generic one, I'm gonna be doing like 3 or 4 startups. Some of my own, some of them, got invited to best ball leagues. But when I go look at a warp graph and I'm trying to formulate how I want to draft here with the off season, everybody knows quarterbacks were bad, right? Like, just in general. A lot of people got burned left and right, with the Herberts of the world, the Lawrences, some of these guys. Daniel Jones at one point for startup value was damn near a second-round pick. Eric and I kind of talked about that, and you lost that dude early, and he was terrible when he was out there on the field. Kind of left and right, you were just kind of getting hurt all over. I do agree with you. I think that bad, sour taste is going to be it. So when I go look at a league and I see that the quarterback, even in a horrible year, right, in general, just all the way across, that warp graph is still above wide receivers or running backs, I'm like, what if What if we get even a regression to the mean of 2018, 19, 20, 21? If we get any kind of like positive regression where quarterbacks start to come back, right? And we start to get back to this 25, 26, 27 fantasy points per game scoring and multiple dudes at the top separating themselves from the junk. Holy shit. Like, that's the kind of value jump that I want to be on.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to overpay to do it, right? And especially in auction, right? I'm not going to go out and spend $350 of my $1,000 budget anymore on one quarterback.
No.
But we're in a startup, and all of a sudden, Justin Herbert kind of slips to that 111, 112, and you're like, fuck, this is easy. Like, I'm going to bank on positive regression. I'm going to bank on him coming back and being this dynamite, this warp difference maker. Even a guy like Trevor Lawrence would be in consideration there. And there's a few things that lend me to believe it, Adam. If you look at the 2021 draft class, we had Kenny Pickett alone.
2022, yep, 2022.
2021, right? He would have been 21, 22, whatever.
Yeah, 2022.
The last 2 years, the last 2 years of draft classes, right? We thought Malik Willis might go 1. We thought Sam Howell was up there.
Right.
None of those dudes, okay?
Yeah, that was the 22 class, yep. Kenny Pickett was the only first round. Yep.
Right. Then we go to 23, right? Anthony Richardson started off hot, got hurt. We miss him. That's an independent value discussion. Bryce Young was dog shit for most, except for week 16, most of the year. CJ Stroud was a great surprise and moved up. But the rest of the quarterback class, like Will Levis, was below mid.
Yes.
As far as what he did, he was a second rounder. Like the NFL had been hurting for quarterbacks for a while. The draft classes did them no favors. They stayed away as a whole. Not a lot of quarterback situations were getting resolved. We had a lot of retreads. We had a lot of injuries. It feels like this 24 draft class with the influx of quarterbacks and, however you want to do it. This is kind of why I posted the other day. You go look at the teams picking in the top 14, top 15. You got 10 teams in there, 10 different teams that need quarterbacks.
Yep.
In one way or another.
And some of them are probably likely to try to get up to that one spot because
they need quarterbacks.
Spot, right?
Yeah, they need quarterbacks in one way or the other. We have veterans getting let go left and right. Teams moving on. We're going to have some retreads landing in some spots that are going to be interesting. Offense as a whole has been a focus of the NFL, especially you can see when the Eagles play here towards the end of the season, you're like, this is such a uninspiring dog shit offense. It feels like there's going to be a rebound towards the offense and especially the quarterback position. So if I'm already breaking even at the quarterback line in a new league or a new startup or heading in where I go, damn, even though quarterbacks were bad in 23, I'm going to bank on the positive regression and I'm going to go, maybe we rebound. It doesn't have to be like this complete 180 where we change directions, but if we get 40% better, you're playing with house money, like found money. You're going to be dominating the piss out of your leagues in 24 because you were willing to take that gamble on the quarterback position.
Yeah, and I think there's because I want to get back to our misses. I don't want this to just take the whole show, but I will say there's two big factors for me that say this. One, that a lot of very good quarterbacks didn't actually have good years, and then the combination of that with a absolute insane amount of injuries to starting quarterbacks this season, I think will end up being I don't think, and I certainly don't hope that we have that many quarterback injuries year in and year out. That would really suck for that to be the case. But that's the reason I believe that the change is coming.
In the auction, I had to pull up Shit Auction 7 was the last auction draft we did before the season actually, kicked off, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at the auction values. I'm so glad I tracked these on Sleeper and put them in so I can go back and look at this. But Patrick Mahomes went for 346, Adam. Right, and I think a lot of people were probably hesitant on C.J. Stroud. He went for 131. So what you're telling me is you could have got 3 C.J. Stroud types for one Patrick Mahomes. And sitting here today, you're like, fuck.
Well, I was just that was gonna be my biggest miss this year, Mike. Is that I am. I know, Mike, you and I tend to sometimes have a little bit of disagreement here when it gets to the diversity or diversifying players, right? For me, another highlight for me this year is going to be my biggest miss was when I had the chance. If I was going to go get an elite quarterback, I was like, instead of paying let's say 30% for Jalen Hurts, I'm going to pay 33 or 34 for Mahomes. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and go all the way to Mahomes because I just know he's that good. Well, guess what? One, I didn't diversify with other elite quarterbacks in that range. I basically just got Mahomes every time there. So that was one big miss, is not just – you don't have to always go right up to the one you believe is the top. And then two, Patrick Mahomes, for me, Mike, was a miss. I had so many teams that – believe it or not, like I just want people to think about this. This is my miss. This is one of my biggest misses. I have a ton of them, by the way. I'm not trying to act like this is the one thing. I have legitimately, Mike, some teams that were really built well, and Patrick Mahomes was the reason that it didn't do well. Like Patrick Mahomes this year, just think about this. Last year, I told you who led the league in passing touchdowns. 36, Dak Prescott. Last year, Mahomes had 41 to lead the NFL. This year, he is barely inside the top 10. He's the same passing touchdowns as frickin' Russell Wilson. I paid the iron price with there was no option for him to do bad, let alone have this bad of a year. And that, you can't do that, especially for how much we play best ball, Mike. You can't consolidate all the way up to that top guy, not diversify it at all, and expect to not get completely burned across all your leagues with that. So that is a microdynamic thing that I was, why did I screw up? When I consolidated way up to the top, it was for Mahomes, and it was all to him. And you're going to lose a lot of best ball leagues doing that, man, when he was this bad.
I'm looking just on Sleepier, too, at my, I had 28 best ball leagues, I think I said, when the playoffs started, and 20
Correct.
of them were in the playoffs.
Correct.
Like my diversification of quarterbacks, like my most rostered quarterbacks this year, is a disgusting list. It's Mac Jones, C.J. Beathard, Zach Wilson, obviously, like those guys you're playing for whatever. Mason Rudolph, Trey Lance, Tannehill, Russ. I'm trying to find a good one. Justin Fields, I guess. Trevor Lawrence. Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence I had 5 shares of.
There you go.
Right. Probably my best. Like, not a lot of Mahomes. Not a lot of Jesus, man. Like, only 3 Dak Prescotts, so, like, he did okay on those teams. Obviously, those ones probably won. 3 of Lamar, 3 of Josh Allen. Like, those did fine. 3 Tuas, 3 Herberts. To the diversification, I was just kind of all over the map on quarterbacks. So I think I can agree with you on that. Like, maybe that lends into it where you're not putting all your eggs in, like,
one basket.
Patrick Mahomes is that dude, or Jalen Hurts for me is that dude, right? If something bad were to happen or down the stretch there.
Exactly. And I think you just kind of have it, like, it wasn't by design for you. You don't care necessarily to say I need to diversify, but that right there just, I think, shows a point where it just happened to be that way for you, because you'll invest in any quarterback, any position. We both will, but if you don't have a little bit of diversity, if you don't diversify at all, you're liable to get stuck with the one quarterback that does screw up or doesn't have a good year, and that's going to totally kill you across a multitude of leagues. So that for me was the combination of those two things: picking the wrong one and putting all my eggs into the basket of Patrick Mahomes.
I like it. All right, buddy. I went to one that probably affected both of us pretty strong. Do you got one that stuck out to you?
What's that?
Biggest miss.
Oh, I was saying my biggest miss was, like, one of my biggest misses was Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, like that was
gotcha. All right,
my Mahomes, and then also not in the Mahomes, also another piece to take away from, not just that Patrick Mahomes was bad. Don't put too many eggs into one basket, especially costing that high, right? Like, if you put all your eggs into Justin Jefferson, even that could have really hurt you because he wasn't available at times. So that's kind of, I guess, the point to go along with Patrick Mahomes. There's like 2 points in that one.
I could take that. One for me. Kind of like the Patrick Mahomes, and it's his teammate, is I thought Travis Kelce was going to be different, right? I thought Father Time was never going to catch up to him.
Yep, me too, buddy.
I paid the iron price for a lot of Travis Kelce in some contending leagues, right, where I'm like, he's just too good. We talk about this all the time. If you were rebuilding, you wanted to get off Travis Kelce, but it was one of those situations where you almost felt like you had to compete because what you were going to get for him on the open market wasn't what he was actually worth to your team. Now, in hindsight, you should have got off of him. Didn't matter if you didn't get full bolt. You should have got off of him, which I didn't in some leagues. And then I made the double down and made the mistake too, especially when we started looking at Warp. I'm like, man, he's been such a difference maker for the last 2 years. This is something that I'm willing to pay 2 firsts for, even in a best ball league or even in a half-point tight end premium where they just really don't matter. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, those are the 2 tight ends that I want to invest in. Both of them burned you. Now, Mark Andrews to injury, but even then, before that, like TJ Hawkinson was outpacing him. Like Sam Laporta as a rookie was keeping up with Mark Andrews as far as Warp when he was healthy. You had some other tight ends start to come out of nowhere. It was just like, damn, man. Investing in the tight end position, really, no matter my tight end premium, was probably a bad choice. And making an exception for a guy that I knew was probably a bad bet somewhere in the back of my mind because of age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I told myself the good body story that I'm like, 1 or 2 more years at least, right? Like, it's going to happen.
Right.
Father Time's always undefeated. We don't know when it comes, but when it comes hard. And it comes, like, it's not that Kelce was dog shit
Christian,
awful.
can you clip that?
It's not, yeah. It's not that he was dog shit awful. It's just the simple fact, right? Everybody else kept up with him. Like, there were people who had David Njoku and Evan Ingram on their teams that were gaping me.
Oh,
And I'm sitting there with Travis Kelce.
In
in
best
the
ball.
playoffs going
In
like,
best ball.
in a good tight end premium going, what the fuck is going on?
I wish I would have after I said another, because that was going to be the same point to my next one, Mike. I had a great team that I still believe strongly in variance. Like I said, I really do. But I went into the playoffs basically being Travis Kelce or bust at the tight end position with the Goon Squad. And I got news for you. That spot was filled with a terrible start by Kelce, and no one really could get in and out of that spot. And that'll kill you. That'll kill you in best ball. And I think in general, Mike, that's going to be one of the lessons in best ball. I was chasing a lot of Warp, and Warp did a lot of very good things for myself and for other people. But I think, again, we have to be very careful with Warp to not – this is going to be my next one, I guess. Didn't mean to cut you off if you were still not finished with the Kelce one. But
Oh, go ahead.
for me, not chasing specifically last year's Warp at even like a line or a player. Like looking a little – we did talk about this, like looking broader. But there was definitely times where I was focusing in on – look at Kelce last year, man. It's a cheat code. It's a cheat code. Look at Mahomes last year, cheat code. Well, guess what those cheat codes did, buddy? That cheat code that you pressed in, it didn't work before the game, and you got gaped in that game because the cheat code didn't come in. So I think chasing Warp specifically, like looking at a Kelce and saying it's just not going to happen, was the next thing for me. And it kind of highlights that same Kelce point for me.
Another one. I got better at it, but still not to the level that I need to be. I gotta do a better job of like going my priors, prospect evaluation, hype, that kind of thing. Like
Look at this guy. This is good to hear. This is good to hear. Not that I'm not the same way, but this is good to hear you say it.
I generally do a pretty good job of just trying to keep this agnostic value approach, but there's still dudes who like catch up to you. There's still dudes who you go, man, I want them. And Scott Connor brought up a great one for me this year where I disagreed with him. And the problem is, like, here we sit right now after the season, and I'm like, fuck, Scott was right the whole fucking time. I should have just liquidated this fucking dude a long time ago, but I kept holding out hope.
How come it's always Scott's got to be right, too? It's like every time I'm wrong on a player conviction, it's like Scott was right. Damn it.
Just to drive that knife in. But
yeah, exactly.
Kendra Miller was a good one.
Oh,
and
God.
I don't know if you remember the off-season tweets about Kendra Miller. I loved him. Eric loves him. You loved him. We ranked him high. We loved the situation. I'm like, whoa, this is going to be the fucking hammered Alvin Kamara catching passes. He's going to get an early opportunity. I don't give a fuck about Jamal Williams. I was right. Jamal Williams didn't matter at all. There's a reason we called him Jamawful for the longest time. Great year last year with Detroit, but you do that wasn't the same situation. All right, boss? So we hit that one. But I thought Kendra was going to have a massive role, and the guy couldn't stay healthy. He had problems in the preseason where he didn't look the greatest. And Scott was arguing with people on Twitter, and I don't think Scott and I ever publicly argued about it or disagreed, even in private, or had a conversation about it. But that was one of those where I see Scott tweet it and have those, and I'm like, All right, Scott, I'll let you do your thing, but I fucking disagree, man. Like, I want all the Kendra I can. Like, I'm not just trading him for any fucking third. I just drafted him in the second. Why would I trade him for any third now in 24? Here we sit, and I'm like, I'd fucking kill to have that third in 24. I would kill to have that third. Please. I could have used that thing during the season. I could have bought Tommy DeVito when he was hot and filled in the best ball league. I could have bought Joe Flacco after 1 week where I'm like, oh, Joe's just going to go out there and fucking sling this thing all over the place. Let me buy this for a quarterback for my championship run. No. Instead, I held on to Kendre Miller all this time, and now I'm sitting here telling people on Canton Bound last week doing the solo pod, like, fuck it, any third, you can have him. Take him. And you know how many people are going to come by right now? Not that many.
Well, I think, one, it was also, just understand in that, and that was Scott also letting you know he didn't take any Kendre in the second. Right?
So,
yeah, there was also his conviction on that, and he happened to be right. But I do think I like that call, being too convicted or letting your priors kind of get in the way. So I think that's a good one in general for you and I. I think we've gotten better, but we must have been pretty bullish from the beginning because while getting better, we got a lot more to improve on, huh?
Yeah, well, I can lump not just Kendra. I don't want to just pick on that guy, but
I know you're using an example. There's other. I know the point is that we have too much conviction in our priors sometimes.
Juju was a good one for me personally, right?
I tried too. I really did. We went back. I think it became personal between you and I at that point. It wasn't even about Juju and Cooks.
Well, it was like the Quentin Johnson, Puka Nacua, right? Which makes the list for me, especially too. Letting go of priors, man. I didn't think Puka was very good, right? And draft capital wise, like there was nothing to tell me that Puka was good or going to be a great prospect. Like who gives a fuck about a round 5 wide receiver, right? You know, I see Debro was one of the only people out there tweeting in the offseason about Puka over and over and over and over and over again. And I thought he was nuts, right? Then we get to week 1. Puka's playing. Puka has a great week. I still couldn't let go of my fucking priors and be like, all right, who gives a shit about draft capital?
I can get behind you after one. I was with you, Mike, after a single week though.
2 weeks? Like it's 2 weeks?
When he had back-to-back 100+ yard games in all those targets and catches, like he had 10 and 15 catches. People don't get that many targets. I don't care what the situation is without earning them to a degree, right?
So
that was when I started to switch.
I guess the question is, at what point do you let go of your priors, and does it matter the player? Okay, so for example, Isaiah Hodgins was somebody that I strongly avoided, right? No matter how he finished last year, some of the games he had, I think he even had a good playoff game last year for the Giants in their game. The drumbeat for Isaiah Hodgins was really good. But one, the profile was bad. I think he was in his year 3 last year and might be year 4 this year. If not, it's, it was, he had multiple years in the league of doing fucking nothing, right? Being a practice squad guy, barely making a roster, couldn't even make an active roster. And then we had a very small sample size of him being relevant after the fact. Does that change though? Like, should that weigh more where you can look at an Isaiah Hodgins and go, no, like this dude's had multiple years, Travis Fulgham, like type, where you go, nah, I'm good. Versus a guy, regardless of draft capital, who comes out and produces right away like that and has that role.
Yes, I do think some of that's there. I think that here's, I guess, I'll probably do more of the Puka stuff on a win of me where it's something I won on, but I'm not going to act like I hammered it home all offseason. I was someone that bought into Puka, I guess, later than probably most, but earlier than I think a lot of people were willing to. I'll just say for the point you're talking about here, it's hard to quantify, but when I see somebody that is getting that many targets, like he was doing something, Mike, that to me at a certain point when like Hodgins or Fulgham, they were having very good moments and nice games. I'm not going to take anything away from what they were doing, but Puka Nacua came in as a rookie with team that we talked about was going to be really bad. This team made the playoffs, and he was earning targets at a very high clip and killing it for the first 5 weeks of the season. So the first week, whatever, it's a totally new situation. But then now teams are starting to understand that that's happening, and he's still killing it. Like, I start to already begin to throw draft capital out the window to an extent there. Like, you're proving it on the NFL gridiron. And then when you think about how he finished his whole season, in the middle, we could admit there was a 4 or 5 week stretch where people probably were getting a little worried. Like, maybe he's not actually that good. He still, granted an extra game, still broke the rookie record. If you take the one game away, he's 28 yards short or something like that of the rookie record. Like, he was on pace for that pretty early. I think there's some times where in a situation like him is going to be rare, but if you're going to let go of the draft capital, because I get the point there, when a guy's doing as much as he was early, like, there's certain times where the draft capital goes out the window for me. When I see a guy have that much success that early without failing, that's hard to, like, ignore for me.
To that point then, too, like a big miss, holding on to guys a little bit too long, right? Like the Kendra Miller thing.
That one, I got, yep, I'm with you. Bad.
So not just with that, but Quentin Johnston for me, right? I want to give people time because they're rookies. But I always find myself in this trap where it's by like week 5, QJ hadn't done fucking anything at him. Yeah. He hadn't did anything all season, to be completely honest. But by week 5, just put yourself in that mindset. Still hadn't done anything. Hadn't even shown a flash. Like, he's not getting targets. He's not getting the ball. The snap share's dog shit. Josh Palmer is clearly their choice for number 3. But there's always those little moments of hope, right? Like Mike Williams down for the year. Okay. Like, they're going to ease him into this. But, when he takes off, he's going to take off. You fast forward to week 7, and you're like, I'm still holding out hope. He still hasn't done anything. By, like, week 8, you've almost resided to the fact, like, this is lost money. I pray he does something to regain his value so I could potentially move off of him to somebody else who still has this hopium. Mm-hmm. But at what point, like, this is something I'm bad at. What point do you just cut your losses and just move on with yourself, right? Because I still, if I got a QJ share, I probably still have it from fucking week 1 or from the trade I made with you.
This is a very, very good point. Like, I kind of touched on this for myself and, like, I think evaluating this specifically in the offseason with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I said why he's different. And I just try to follow me on this, what I mean, okay? Because when I look at this, I was saying essentially, and I kind of was echoing over and over, like, with JSN, I don't know what will happen, but he's going to get a pass. Look at Drake London. He is, because of the community value, he's going to get a pass. Quentin Johnson, before he went anywhere, before he went to the Chargers, and that boosted a lot of people's opinion because of the landing spot, people were very high and, like, they were iffy. The community was very torn on that type of a prospect, right?
Had a lot of red flags, right?
Correct.
Not as big as we thought he would. Not as athletic.
Didn't play as big. People felt like he wasn't a good high contested catch
Only
passer.
played on one side of the field, right?
Exactly. All those type things were making his community value very polarized. He was very split. So I think, Mike, the differentiator for me at receiver especially is if that case was JSN, I would have a harder time throwing him away for nothing or for a loss, because I still think the community eventually will bail me out, and there's probably some better talent for JSN. Quentin Johnson, Mike, I was a little bullish just because you think about it. I was like, people are a little too out on QJ, and ultimately that was because of this split community view. When that split community view is having a guy that's doing this little, and then opportunities are coming away, he's still doing that little. Like, I don't want to call it Jalen Reagor, but that's where I think you can start to say Jalen Reagor and get out for whatever you can right now, because the price only goes down. Like, that's the way I'll probably approach it. And I could be wrong sometimes. Maybe a guy like that will end up, like, somehow miraculously turning his career around. But I can live with the fact that that's probably not the right process play, and that's going to be an aberration. That's, I guess, the way I would view it, or I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my way of kind of viewing it and what I would have done in that situation. It was where I was a little more comfortable getting off of QJ was, like, I could see this going badly. I didn't expect it to go this bad when I made those trades with you, by the way, for Puka. I did not expect it to be this bad. But that's, I guess, the way I would have approached or would approach the QJ thing. For the record, I didn't sell all of my QJ either. I'm just telling you, I think, like, looking back at it.
So I just wanted to look at a couple. So we look at July, like August range, QJ is kind of hovering around wide receiver 20, right? But you can hear the noise. By September, he's down to wide receiver 26. Wide receiver 28 kind of when the Mike Williams thing, and then there's a little dip down to 40s. He must have done something at the first, couple weeks of October because he kind of bounced back up to 36. Is that point where you get that dip, like you start to get that fall from 20 to 28, let's say that. Like if you're kind of keeping an eye on it, is that where you go, like, I'm good, like I just cut bait? Because specifically, like to your JSN point, he started at wide receiver 11 in July. August, wide receiver 11. Didn't start the season that great, right? At all. No. Almost non-existent.
Well, he really didn't. If you look back at his game log too, Mike, he didn't really do anything. I mean, he started to show some flashes and some moments, but when you look at his game log, he at most had a touchdown, and I think he was like 60 yards in a game at one point at the most, something like that. So
he had a September fall too, but he only got down to like 21. Right, so from 11 to 21, he was still within that range. Like people are still going like, oh yeah, he's a wide receiver 2. At worst, like dynasty value. QJ has fallen into that wide receiver 3 range. Like for these rookie wide receivers, if you got any kind of red flags and you haven't produced right away and you fall into that wide receiver 3 range, can we just kind of agree that's probably like, hey, I need to get off this dude. Like this is my sign. Let me find somebody else who has the hopium. I will re-roll into another wide receiver 3 type and a plus if you'll give it to me and just move on with myself. Like could that kind of be the firewall, you think, the cutoff point?
I think that's, if you look at it from a value lens, it's probably a very fair assessment. Just because if a guy gets down that far, the community probably has already told you somewhere, someplace that they weren't that high on him from the beginning or that they were a little worried. And when you get that far into the season, let's say at least halfway, certainly 2/3 of the way in, because what do we know at the end of the year now? You are going to be the complete, like, you're the poster child of a face planner. And we all know the face planner is not what you want to bet on. And I think the community is probably becoming a lot smarter on even investing in face planners. So now you're probably having even a hard time getting out at a loss. Like you're having a hard time getting out for anything right now. So to me, I think, yes, that's a good point. If the community shows you that they're halfway through the season or 2/3 of the way through the season, like we're pushing him. Like he was pushing wide receiver 4 territory right there. Like
right.
That's where, yeah, I agree with you.
Where you just go, I'm good. Let me look at Kendre too. Like see if you can get that one.
Well, Kendre's at the running back probably started really dipping fast, I bet. Probably got in the 30s.
Well, he started out as RB 30 right before the season. By September, he's down to 35, 37, 38. The only difference with Kendre is he's had like a little bit of a bounce back, and there's still that hopium. So that's why I put him on the sell list. Like there's still people out there who will buy Kendre right now. Like there are. Eric and I disagreed about this on America's Game, which was fine. Like I'm all for disagreement.
Sure.
But like he still kind of believes in Kendre, so I'm just of the opinion if you want to give me these RB 30-some prices, by all means, you have it, and I'll go find another guy in that range. But I don't think it's as easy. I think it's more prevalent. Like it's easier to see the dip at wide receiver because it's not just
Definitely.
a QJ thing, right? QJ had red flags, but let's just change the subject. What if this had happened to Zay Flowers, right? Zay Flowers started in the same QJ range, and there was a debate back and forth, albeit I was wrong on that one, on which one I would rather have.
Right.
I still like Zay, but there were some concerns. But say Zay Flowers didn't do anything, right? Zay Flowers is in the QJ. He hadn't done anything. I think with Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison, if you still see that, where they fall into that wide receiver 3 range as a rookie, you let go of your priors. Now, the only ones I will make an exception for, and you and I have talked about this, would be the JSNs, the Drake Londons of the world, because they tend to retain value. Like your limit or your leash on getting fucked with these guys is a lot longer because the community's like, well, they were wide receiver 1 for a reason.
Right, and even Jordan Addison, who at one point was, I think, a lot more viewed rosely, or he was a lot more adored by everyone in the community. Started, the weight and the size didn't check all the boxes. So like to Zay Flowers, to Jordan Addison, to everybody this year in this class that wasn't JSN, there was enough of, I would say, community negativity out there to, if they started really poorly and didn't do anything for the first year, you could start to have the conversation. Now, Quentin Johnson just happens to be this year's example of it. I'm not trying to put I don't want to put the name of Zay Flowers and act like Zay Flowers could have done that. He could have. When you think about the names, yes, if you put names to it this year, those are the type of guys that had good enough draft capital and investment, but they weren't the best community view. And yes, I agree. I think those are the type of prospects moving forward. You could definitely say, man, I should probably just get something back before it goes to zero.
I can get behind that. I look at the grass for a Jalen Reagor as kind of the other one too, right? we started so high, pushing that wide receiver 20 like QJ, and then I think the community's getting
sharper,
smarter. Yes, a lot smarter because his fall wasn't as steep. Even Sky Moore's last year wasn't as steep.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I think now it's going to be a lot harder to move off of face planners like Quentin Johnson than it might have been in the past. You might be able to find someone that still invests because of the name value from a year ago, right? I
think that's probably the overall theme of the miss is that I need to be better at doing it quicker, right? Because the community's getting sharper, right?
Exactly.
I need to be more proactive.
That's a great highlighting finish point on that. Yes, as the community begins to get sharper, we have to be a little quicker in our decisions. I agree with that.
I think you need to be a little bit more reactive, and I need to turn it up. Generally, I slow play it, and the whole it's dynasty, and things take time. Yes, to some extent, but I also think because of the way the community reacts to it, I need to be more comfortable with. Say I did move off of QJ by week 5, Adam, right? And we're kind of in that. He just hit wide receiver 3 territory. People are still kind of on the fringe, but somebody might give me a late first what they think. I just need to go and say, yes, I'm going to take this. I'm going to move off of him. I'll figure the rest out later and be okay with missing. Maybe week 6, he goes off for 203 touchdowns. And you're like, fuck. Right? Just sold him for that. But you need to be okay with it because I think in the long run, more likely than not, we see these face planter wide receivers quite a bit. And instead of getting stuck with them where you can barely get a third for this kind of dude now, I need to be okay with just cashing out at 60, 70% because I'm going to have more wins than I'm going to have losses.
Definitely agree. I totally agree with that. I was going to say, Mike, I think that as far as misses go, I mean, this one's kind of crazy when I really look back at it. All right. And I was somebody that was the biggest Cam Akers stan out there. All right. And last year during the 22 year, as much as I still was really loving, I wanted to love Cam Akers, I went away during the season, right? Because he was terrible. And then he came back and had such a great finish. And you're looking and it's just the backfield didn't change at all, really. I'm like, there's no way that they seem like they finally ironed this out. I was in on Cam Akers. Now, where I can look and say that, I guess really, Mike, the reality is the McVay offense running back is something that I've been wanting to chase. And that's, I think, part of, you could really probably attest a lot of Cam Akers' success when he was having it to being in that system. The more I think about it. I was so wrong on Cam Akers this year. And I just assumed he was going to be the starting back. I think a lot of people did. I think there was a lot of reason to buy into his bounce back. And you want to talk about, Mike, to your point of not getting off of players. I invested in Cam Akers in a lot of spots. In the spot of his complete peak, where he was coming off of that, rookie season finish, and because I was like, you couldn't get out at any type of a price, really. I almost invested back in more after the Achilles tear, and through the ups and downs, I held so many of those shares, and again, this year got completely burnt by Cam Akers in a bunch of spots. And I think as a whole, the running back position, Mike, for me, the learning point, I think, from the big miss of Cam Akers again, is that this position for me, outside of one or two people here and there, is just going to be year to year. My dynasty ranks aren't going to look very, very far off, if at all, from what redraft ranks would look like for me. And that's... I'm going to really get almost what feels super uncomfortable as an old running back truther in the way that I approach this position. I just have to do it to myself. I have to make myself, whether I love this prospect or not, it goes back to Quandaries Miller. You made a point about with Eric and your difference. I kind of agree with both of you. I agree with Eric that Quandaries Miller gets a chance to get some run. Hell yeah, he could be awesome. But I agree with you is that I want that for any player. I can get out of Zamir White. I can get out of anybody. I don't need it. I don't need to spend RB30 on Kendre, right? That's I think the reality of the running back position for me as a whole. But my miss, to be very clear, Cam Akers, horrible.
I love that too. Just running backs in general too. Talking about it, I think I'm going to be very select, and I think I did a decent enough job, at least with the running backs, where I said like, there's probably 3 dudes, maybe 4, that I care about for multiple years of dynasty value. Outside of that, I treat them as, like you said, redraft, one and done. If you can do something now, however, one of the misses I had, Rashad White, the Kyron Williams thing.
Obviously.
And here's where I mean the miss is, I need to be more open where even if I don't like you, you don't have age, whatever, I need to be open to the opportunity. Okay,
Yeah,
if you're getting
exactly
an opportunity, that's all I should fucking focus on for running backs, right? I can like Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson, and if I want to, or Breece Hall, like if I want to keep those guys as dynasty assets, that's completely fine because I think you're relatively safe at the running back position if you're betting on year 1, year 2 guys with really good draft capital who are explosive athletes, that kind of thing. Everybody else, though, if you don't fall into that category, the only thing I should be looking at is opportunity.
Correct.
I don't care that Antonio Gibson, I love him because he's a side speed freak, and I'm like, if he ever got, right? You do this shit all the time. If. I don't care about the fucking ifs. I care about what you got now. And like Rashad White was a miss because I'm going, I don't really like the prospect. He goes down too easily. None of that shit should have mattered, and I should have just looked and gone, his backup is Keyshawn Vaughn. His backup is dog shit Chase Edmonds. His backup is whatever. He's the only fucking weapon that they have in this backfield right now, and he's getting all the work. And especially after week 1 or week 2, as soon as you know it and they show it, like with Kyron Williams, you go, fuck it. The rest is out the window. This is something I want to invest in.
Okay, to highlight the point, right? To really highlight the miss and I think what the correction looks like. Okay, Mike, we did this with DeAndre Swift for a while, right?
Yes.
And guess what finally happened this year?
Got the work.
But here's think about it this way. Okay, yes, DeAndre Swift was actually very good this year. I think he was a Pro Bowler this year. But you got the same thing out of Kyron Williams, if not better. Like DeAndre Swift finally got like the lion's share, not in Detroit. He got the whole backfield, right? and we'd rather have Kyron Williams.
For sure.
Sometimes I think at this position, like the prospect profile, if it's super elite in the draft, like if all the boxes absolutely check, there be the few rare ones. And that needs to be extremely rare now. Like that line needs to be drawn to 2-3 people, really at most. Because guess what the other guys end up being? Javonte Williams. Right? Why?
Yeah.
It just if you have an opportunity, the prospect profile maybe is a tiebreaker if I know that you're going to have the backfield versus someone I don't like as much. But if someone's going to have the opportunity, for example, whether that is Rashad White or it's really gross and it's James Conner, those guys have opportunities, old or young, to really thrive for fantasy. That's the reality. And he's really strictly come to that.
Well, let me put it in a great example, at least for me, as far as how you miss it. And this is where I do self-evaluation. And I go, why would I do it for one, but I didn't do it for the other, right? It all comes down because I like the guy a little bit more.
100%.
I like James Cook, and I kept pounding you like, hey, Adam, James Cook. And you're like, fuck you, man. Like, James Cook. But what was the difference between James Cook and Rashad White, right? Same age, basically, second-year guys.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them, you looked at the season, you're like, okay, they got the backfield. I wasn't worried about Latavius Murray. I wasn't worried about Damian Harris.
That was the one thing I will admit that my miss was if you would have told me that James Cook was going to actually take the backfield like he did, I would have been in on James Cook. I believe that the way that they misused him, it felt like, at least in his first year,
gotcha,
it wasn't going to be the case, even though I didn't like those other guys. For example, trying to think of the clear cuts. Trying to think of the clear cut one where Devin Singletary versus Dameon Pierce. Like,
yeah,
I didn't even think Devin Singletary was going to eat into that much of the workload. But guess what he did? He freaking took the backfield. So, like, for me, that was the misses. I didn't think it was going to be as clear as day with James Cook. If you would have told me, to your point, that the opportunity was sized into this, I would have been like, I could not have fought you at all. I would have had no chance to.
Juxtapose this too, like in season, right? Like, I wasn't the biggest Jerome Ford fan.
Correct.
You know that.
Yep.
Like, I've never really been a big Jerome Ford guy.
But after, that's the OG days, me and you going back and forth on Jerome Ford.
After Nick Chubb goes down, like, why aren't you buying into Jerome Ford? Right?
We were worried about Kareem Hunt, and Kareem Hunt still came and still kind of took some carries. I mean,
almost immediately, like, Kareem Hunt wasn't even on the team.
Right. Yep.
Like, they had to sign that dude, and you were like, yeah, you're going to have a ramp-up time, and he might have some work. But you should have been on Jerome Ford from the jump. Like, there's nobody else. He's getting the workload. It's a running offense, yada, yada, yada. Like, he's explosive. Who cares about the prospect profile as a whole? Like, there may be some things about his game. I thought he went down too easily on contact. Not the greatest receiver, yada, yada, yada. However you wanted to put it. Listen, he's got some athleticism. He can run the football. He put up some production in college, and he has a backfield to himself as of right now.
Yeah, agreed. I think for this position,
I can almost guarantee if you go back and you pull receipts about it, we're probably talking about on a trade show or the AMA, like, hey, what's Jerome Ford's worth right now? Like, what would you pay? And we're probably like, maybe a third.
Right.
Like maybe 2/3 if I'm feeling frisky. I don't think anybody was like, pay a second for him. Right? If you're competing, throw that second in right now. Do it.
No, I eventually bought for a second, but it took me longer than it should have. It took me a lot longer.
Kind of the same thing. You remember the heat that I was getting for the Raheem Mostert thing, right? Like, people are like, Mike's lost his shit. And I said, like, maybe the move is if the other contending teams don't want to sell Raheem Mostert, maybe you get something crazy and you throw your first in, right? Here, I'll give you my late first for Raheem Mostert. I take him off your roster. I put him on mine. I got a warp difference maker at the running back position. Raheem Mostert, man, other than, unfortunately, semifinal week and championship week where he didn't fucking play for you. Or just championship week. I think he played in the semifinals. But, missed out on the most important game. But leading up to that, right, if you were in the quarterfinals, there's a reason you won the quarterfinal matchup, Raheem Mostert, right? There's a reason that your team was good and actually made the playoffs in the first place was Raheem Mostert scoring you fantasy points. But that's the kind of thing, like, opportunity, decent enough offense, running the football. They don't look terrible. They can somewhat run block. It's not a horrible situation. Just invest in running back opportunity and stop worrying about all the other shit. I think that's probably the biggest miss. And, stop trying to do this prospect evaluation where I like James Cook a little bit more than Rashad White. But I'm more willing to buy into the James Cook backfield than I am the Rashad White one. Why?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same fucking thing in the end. Buy into both.
Yep. All right. So I would say this one, Mike, I actually still kind of, in a way. Now, I'm not saying it's not a miss. I can't figure out how to change or what like how to move forward differently on like Jordan Love this year because, Mike, I was not in because of the situation. Just it felt like it was going to have to thread the needle so finely. Because a guy that doesn't get a time or chance to play this late, they didn't pick up his fifth-year option. They did give him a contract to try to give him a chance to show what he could do. So I understood that there was a chance he could play well, but Mike, it started so poorly. Now, granted, it wasn't like I think I didn't maybe give a long enough leash, but typically, if you see a guy that doesn't have a guaranteed contract for that long play 6 weeks, really that rough. I tend to want to be out sooner than later, kind of the Quentin Johnson point. But I'll just admit, I mean, geez, man, this Jordan Love thing, while I thought was a, victory lap midway through the October, whatever it was, turned into this guy. I'll be interested to see what his career turns into. But, Mike, he was unbelievably good this year in fantasy. And then at the end of the year, I mean, really found something with the offense and the continuity. He was like almost 70% completion with multiple touchdowns and not nearly as many interceptions. I think he had one pick across the last 7 games or something nuts. So kind of a rare example. I admit that I was way wrong, but I'd be curious if anyone has any ideas on, like, I don't know. I think this one's going to be a little more of an aberration that guys that typically get first-round draft capital don't sit this long either. So
I think it is an aberration from the draft capital standpoint, but for me it was at least earlier in the season, and I'm 50-50 on this one. So it's a miss and a hit at the same time, right? Because there's 2 quarterbacks like this where wasn't high on him coming in, Jordan Love for obvious cases. And even though Sam Howell is like my dude, you know, I think you and I in the offseason talked all, we're going to see Jacoby Brissett at some point, right? Like, it's good to see Sam Howell get a shot. Kind of interested, you know, in best ball, I'll roster him, but it's not somebody I slot in like, hey, this is my QB too, right? I don't really want this shit. Fast forward to mid-season, like, I'm buying into both of these guys because of Warp, and I'm looking at it and I'm going, you know, regardless of how I think they're playing or what they actually look like on the field from a fantasy production standpoint, I can buy in on them. I bought in a little bit heavier on Sam Howell than I did Jordan Love, right? Because you still got some of those priors, and you're like, oh, well, fuck, maybe Sam Howell was the truth. Maybe I actually am smart and did this and can evaluate quarterbacks. You know, like, you start to get full of yourself.
I think that part would be where we tend to go wrong, is when we think we have a quarterback evaluation strategy.
Right.
You know?
But in my defense, I did buy in on Jordan Love too. Like, there's some receipts of me and going into the playoffs for contenders with Justin Herbert or the Trevor Lawrences of the world making deals for Jordan Love. And I think you're probably going to kind of run that risk, right? Now, if I wasn't an idiot, I would have bought in on Brock Purdy too, right? So we would have been 66% right, you know, as far as buying in on him early. But I think if you just kind of play that role and they're still within that reasonable price range, because most of the dynasty community is going to hold their priors, right? We're going to hold our priors on Jordan Love. We're going to hold our priors on Sam Howell. I'm going to hold my priors on Brock Purdy. Just look at fantasy production. This is where the warp comes into place. I think you're still going to buy in, like, even if you bought into Sam Howell and you're sitting here now and you're like, fuck, I wish I wouldn't have. What'd you buy in at? First, maybe? 110, 111, 112?
Yeah, I saw some people buy for a first and a second when he was really peaking, you know?
Right. But say you did that in multiple leagues, right, over a portfolio, 40 leagues. Let's just throw that out there. And you bought equal shares. Maybe you bought into 10 total. You know,
if you bought 3, let's say you bought 9 total. So you bought 3 Love, 3 Purdy, and 3 Howell, you're saying?
Yeah, 9 total, you know.
You'll end up.
You're sitting there the ones that you paid the
yeah.
price for Purdy and for Jordan Love. You're like, fuck yeah. Like, I don't know if I can get these dudes for that right now. Those Sam Howell ones, you go, fuck, I missed 3 of them. Okay. It's the way it is. I think with that, at least with the quarterback, like, I'm just going to look more at production and stop trying to, like, scout. Like, I'm not fucking Dane Brugler. I'm not Todd McShay.
Here's the big difference, at least for me, with, like, Jordan Love, where it was harder versus, like, Purdy and versus Howell. So with Howell, I knew, though, Mike, this team was not very good, and he was going to have to continue to have this uphill, like, swimming against the current, essentially, to keep them out of a position to replace him, right? That was part of the conundrum with him. Where Purdy is, you've talked about it too. Like, we'll see in the playoffs if he ends up having a clunker or something like we saw versus the Ravens. All bets could be off, but I knew, at least with Purdy, like, this team is, as assembled, is just ridiculous around him, right?
And it is an unfair evaluation, right? Like, if a quarterback,
Correct.
a young quarterback, any quarterback really, if the team around you is dog shit, like, everybody assumes it's the quarterback's fault, right? Like, we just juxtapose Patrick Mahomes in this situation, this would be a better situation. No. Every quarterback needs a good situation around him, so unfairly sometimes they get most of the blame. And on the opposite, if the team does well, sometimes people prop them up a little bit too much on, like, they're the ones doing it. No,
well, and to that point, like, that's where I agree. It is unfair evaluation, but as far as fantasy goes and, like, future, what do you want to call it? Future certainty or odds of their future changing.
Right.
I'll bake it in. It should be baked in. To your point, though, it's not necessarily fair to the quarterback. The thing with Love for me that was concerning was they started slow as a team. He started slow. And part of the situation that was, for me, uneasy was I'm looking at a totally young, what feels like a rebuilding team too, right? All these weapons around him are young. Aaron Jones got hurt. I'm just thinking, like, this is a guy that isn't playing well. It's going to continue to get worse. Jordan Love, honestly, what's crazy about him, and I'm not saying I'm not trying to defend it. I'm just saying how incredibly impressive it was. This guy, while playing poorly like that, was able to, with this young team, keep his head on his shoulders and turn his season completely around to make the Packers actually a pretty decent team at the end of the year. Like, that's really impressive, man, honestly, from a young kid. So I don't know what his career will shake out as, and I don't know how often we're going to be looking at a guy that sits for 3 years and then has this type of up and down start. But I was way off on Jordan Love We'll wait till the victories for the Christian Watson part, but Jordan Love definitely I was off.
As of right now, I'm fucking man. I am bought into Jordan Love. As far as like this is a guy I'll probably actively target in the offseason. So
I'll be curious about that.
what sealed
Go
it for me was watching the game with Maddie and Cody on their recap on Sunday night, right? Watching the game or their watch along, and we're watching them play the Chiefs, and I'm watching them like the Chiefs had a good defense. L'Jarius Sneed fucking balled his ass off at that cornerback spot. Chris Jones was a beast like always. Linebacker play was good. The Chiefs had a good defense.
Yep.
And you've seen like when they've gone up against some good offense, they embarrass the fuck out of them.
For sure.
Watching him fucking carve their ass up left and right and the throws he was making, I was like, fuck it. Like I just let go of the prior. Jordan Love is that dude right now. And he's doing it, right? Like you said, you touched on a little bit about Christian Watson, but, injured. Didn't play, wasn't a big part of the offense, outside of a handful of games. Dontavian Wicks was a hell of a surprise, right? Bo Melton's coming off the fucking streets at the end of the year and, like, putting up numbers. Malik Heath, like, I didn't even know who the fuck that guy was until, like, week 9. And I'm like, hey, well, he's decent. Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, no Bakhtiari at left tackle, which we haven't seen him since like 2014. That's one of the best tackles in the entire league when he was healthy.
Yep.
We haven't seen that guy, young team, moving on from Aaron Rodgers, like you said, all the shit that was surrounding him. I'm like, to do this against the Chiefs, along with the multiple weeks where I'm like, your fantasy points are kind of surprising. Fuck, this might be the dude. So
Well, and mind you, Mike, that was off of the back of what he just did on Thanksgiving, right? Versus the Lions. It was
blow up week,
it wasn't like it was just the one aberration week versus the Chiefs. He had just balled out again on a back-to-back, now we played the Chiefs. And then you saw the rest of the season. I mean, he had one pick for the rest of the year. I mean, the guy turned his career around, or his season around for sure, I'll say. Possibly career.
Oh, he turned his career around.
You're for sure, like, you don't think there's any chance of regression for him?
I think there's probably a chance of regression, right? But like you said, going into the year, it was what do we got? We're not picking up his fifth-year option. If he came out and he played, if he melted down like Sam Howell did at the end of the year.
Okay, to that point, yes, I would have changed.
As far as his career, it's done. Like it's over. There's no next year. Like we're done with you.
I get what you're saying. Yes, to that point, and yeah, he did. He definitely turned his career around, even on the short term, for sure. After the way he played this last year, ridiculous much.
He turned it around from this. He went from uncertain to like, yes, you're definitely getting.
You love what you see in Jordan Love, and you also are looking like if he's able to replicate this, I think next year in any capacity, you're giving him a bag of some sort.
Heaven help the community. Now I'm not saying it's going to happen. Fizzle will probably hate me, and so will Christian and all the other damn Cowboys fans that we seem to, surround us with.
Just think about this for a second, though, Mike. I just want everyone, when I say why I have a hard time figuring out how I look at the process and say what I'd change. There's a guy that didn't play well, and they're 3-6, man.
Right.
Like that. I think I will just. I definitely was on priors with Jordan Love, but I also this is hard to see coming changing, man. 3-6, a young team. It's like, what the hell? How it was crazy. It was awesome. It was awesome to see him play that well, that much down the stretch. Like completely different quarterback. Got a lot comfortable with the system. But Matt's point, right? This team's 3-6. You're thinking they're probably going to move on from him. You get out for a first and a second, thinking like, oh man, I can't believe I was able to do that. And then now you're like, oh shit, man. 108 and a second, we'll see.
Yeah, just thinking about it right now, like how many rookie picks would you want before Jordan Love right now? Ooh. Top 3, top 4?
I would definitely take the top 4. After that, I don't think I would. I don't want him over Love. No way.
Jane Daniels or Jordan Love?
Yeah, I think that's where you can make a case.
The litmus test right there.
I think that's close. I probably would lean the 104, but if you... It also, I believe that Jaden Daniels is going to get very high draft capital, like a top
Correct.
10 type pick.
Well, let's assume 5 or 6.
Okay, then I want 104 Jaden Daniels. I think the problem with 104 and where it's sketchy is if what if he ends up being 15 or 12 or something, or
Neighbors or Jaden Daniels.
Do I want Neighbors or Jaden Daniels? I want Jaden Daniels right now with what I know, but we'll see.
Okay. Jordan Love or Neighbors?
I'll tell you right now that's close. I think it depends on what you believe in the position. I'd probably take Jordan Love, but I could see with a lot of the quarterback situation, Mike, I bet you're going to see neighbors going a lot higher than you think because if people are fading quarterbacks, I bet. Watch. People are going to start fading quarterbacks in these startups this year after last year.
What'll be interesting to me is kind of like Michael Penix on the college side, though. Like Jordan Love has an incredible opportunity, too, to change a lot of opinions. Sure. Even people who may not have been as aware or watching a whole lot of Green Bay games, which is, they were barely made the playoffs, right? We can kind of say it, barely snuck into the playoffs. But now you're going against the Dallas Cowboys at Dallas, on the road. If you go in against the Dallas Cowboys, the 2 seed, right, on Wild Card Weekend, and he balls out of his fucking mind.
Fizzle. Don't listen.
That's why I said, like, I'm not saying, but if it happened. Like,
he's not saying, but he's saying.
He's got an opportunity, kind of like Penix did against Texas, where people are like, oh, shit, like, who's it? This dude's nice. Right now, kind of like Penix, there's also the opportunity for the hype to get a little bit too out of hand, and then, maybe if he were to beat the Cowboys and move on in the playoffs, then, disaster strikes against the 49ers or some shit, right? Yep. Like, there's that possibility, too, but I'm just saying he's got a possibility here because he's playing in the playoffs and he's going to be on prime time in front of a bunch of eyes that his value could even sneak up a little bit higher.
Any last misses?
I think that was it, man. We covered a lot. A lot.
I mean,
good. there's some individual player misses, like Juwan Johnson. I had a lot of Juwan Johnson and then didn't do shit. But hey, Juwan Johnson, he got me when it counted, right?
That doesn't belong in this podcast. That doesn't belong in this podcast. We'll do it in a different podcast. But Mike, what's crazy to me about the playoffs this year and just seeing it and how it went down, you can roster construct so you're blue in the face. You can capture warp so you're blue in the face. But you know what only matters in the playoffs? Capturing the warp in the playoffs. Like,
right.
That's what's crazy about it is you talked about Travis Kelce. Mike, think about that. Travis Kelce actually, for the most of the season, early especially, like helped teams actually get to the playoffs. But what did he do? Absolutely nothing, right? Absolutely nothing. It's in the playoffs. It comes down to every week, what's your team putting in and what's not happening. So it was a lot of fun this playoffs. But man, it was crazy. Some of these performances, like the semi-weeks, week 16, it felt like the fantasy scoring in general was just wild. Like there was so many games of just insane, performances.
We talked about Travis Kelce, right? You brought him up, and I was just looking at a lineup league with Travis Kelce at start 2 tight end with a half point premium just for the playoff weeks, 15, 16, 17. Like he's just barely in front of Elijah Higgins as far as
I know.
Warp goes.
I saw one of these. I saw one of these shorts. I was just scrolling. I saw one of these shorts where on Fantasy Footballers they were going over who had better points per game in the playoffs than Travis Kelce, and Kyle Pitts had a better points per game than Travis Kelce.
I'm looking at Durham Smythe ahead of Travis Kelce.
Right. There's just, all kinds of names. You're like, holy crap, man. All right.
Durham Smythe.
Speaking of which, that's about as cute as we get on holy macro, man. This is a good one, though. This is a very good one.
It's good. I always love these takeaways. This is where you learn. But next week we do get some gloating, so if you want to miss out on that. We did have some hits. Unfortunately for y'all, I'll probably do some gloating because I did have some hits. You don't get seven. I'm now officially 7 GOAT rings because I did it in one season, right? Sorry, 7 GOAT rings. It's over. I'm 7 GOAT rings because I did it in one fucking season, son. So next week's gloat week. GOAT week.
GOAT and gloat week. GOAT rings, gloat rings, Mike's gloating. It's going to be fun. We're going to go over winners, but we appreciate everyone's happening. It felt really good, Mike, to be back here. Just remember.
I missed y'all.
Just remember, when your league mates are playing chess, play 4D chess. We're out of this thing.
That's going to do it. There'll be no trade show this week, by the way, too. We just don't have enough right after the season. But 2 weeks, we'll be back. I'm sure
we'll be back with the trade show the following week. Giving you guys put the trades in there, man. We're waiting on y'all.
Yeah. Go make some deals. Damn it.
There you go. Love y'all. Peace.
Peace.